We want to talk about this morning no right to complain. No right to complain. Kent Crockett tells a story of a friend of his who lived on the east coast of Florida, just a few miles away from Kennedy's Space Center. He said that he told his friend that it must have been an amazing sight to be able to watch the space shuttle lunches and have the opportunity to go to the beach every day. His friend responded by saying, "I never go to the beach. I don't even go outside of my house to watch the space shuttle lunches." Crockett says to his friend, "You're kidding me. Why not?" He said, "Because I've seen it so many times that it's no big deal." You know, when I thought about it, brothers and sisters, many of us have grown so accustomed to seeing the blessings of God every day. So much so until we have a tendency to stop noticing how good God is. But can I say to you that whenever you stop noticing them, you stop appreciating them. And whenever you stop appreciating them, you start thanking God for them. And whenever you stop thanking God for them, we usually start complaining. Crockett tells another story about a man who found some money crumbled up on the ground. Crockett says the man picked it up, unwaddled it, and discovered that it was a $1 bill. The man said in a complaining fashion, "That's just my luck. If somebody else had found it, it would have been a $5 bill." You see, complainers always look at the negative side of every situation, and they fail to give God thanks for what they have. But they choose to gripe because they don't have any more. And so the question that I raised this morning is, are you thankful or are you a complainer? Will Boeing suggested that complaining is like bad breath. You notice it when it comes out of somebody else's mouth, but you don't notice it when it's your own. From time to time, all of us are guilty of complaining. You see, it's just human nature that when things don't go the way that we want them to go, or when circumstances are not ideal, or when situations don't line up like we think they ought to line up, it's a natural response to complain. But have you ever stopped, my brothers and sisters, to consider the fact that excessive, unnecessary, and unjustified complaining is a moral issue? You see, brothers and sisters, whenever we think about sin, we think about those things that the 10 Commandments forbids us to do. Thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not lie. But can I say, you brothers and sisters, there's another sin that has just as much of a damaging effect upon us as the breaking of the 10 Commandments. And that's the sin called complaining. Therefore, today, my brothers and sisters, I want to point out how complaining displeases God. When we unjustifiably and in a dissatisfaction manner complain about things in our lives when they don't turn out exactly like we want them to. And I believe that there is no other group of people that fits this description than the people in our text, the children of Israel. For at the time of our text, the children of Israel, the Jews, had just been released from Egyptian slavery. And so they are just 3 days' journey outside of Egypt. They're on their way to the land that God had promised them. They had not long since crossed the Red Sea. They were now near the borders of a land called Canaan. Land that is described as a land that flows with milk and honey. Yonder they go, 600,000 strong, not counting the women and children. So that says that there were more than 1 million on their way to Canaan. Yonder they go, following a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. And they are actually free from bondage after 430 years being in slavery and bondage. Praise God, they are now free. But at the point in our text, something went wrong with Israel. Time when they should have been happy. Times when they should have been rejoicing. Times when they should have had a smile on their face and glad about it. Something is wrong with Israel. They had an unhappy look on their faces. And so Israel, I need to ask you a question. What's wrong with you? Why are you so unhappy? Why is there such a look of discontentment upon your faces? What's wrong with you, Israel? Why are your lips poked out? What's wrong, Israel? Well, why are your stature sagging? Why are your faces pointed toward the ground? Well, Israel's problem was she had a complaint against God. And brothers and sisters, their complaint sounds a whole lot like us. And I want to suggest to you this morning that Israel had no right to complain. And guess what? You and I have no right to complain. I'm talking about even on the worst day of our lives. I'm talking about even when the worst things in our life that could have happened does happen. We still have no right to complain. Let me share with you what I see in the text. Number one, let me tell you, when we complain, we display the wrong attitude toward God. Listen to how the text opens up verse 1. Now, when the people complain, this passage is a recording of the murmuring of Israel. Well, you see, God had been good to the children of Israel, but it was something about them. They always found something to complain about. They no longer had to endure the hideous and horrible conditions down in Egypt, but they complained. They didn't have to deal with slavery anymore, yet they complained. They didn't have to deal with Pharaoh and a hard taskmaster, yet they complained. They didn't have to deal with working all day without pay, but they complained. No more working, making bricks without straw, yet they complained. No more having a hard taskmaster standing over them, looking over their shoulder, yet they complained. No more hearing the cracking of the rawhide whips that tore their skin from their back, yet they complained. You see, brothers and sisters, it seems as though they had forgotten God's goodness. Seemed like they had forgotten from whence God had brought them from. But let me tell you now, before we look at them, before we get this arrogant attitude toward them, can I say that some of us is still true today? We are blessed people. And no longer do we have to deal with some of the conditions that our forefathers and my mothers had to deal with in the past. Yet, we complain. Our young people never had to live through some of the stuff that some of us in here who are older and our grandparents had to live through. No more slavery, yet we complain. No more mandatory riding at the back of the bus, but yet we complain. No more eating at segregated restaurants, yet we complain. No more toiling all day long in cotton fields, yet we complain. No more having to go around to the back of the store to get our merchandise, yet we complain. I wish I had somebody in here. As good as God has been to us on our worst day, in spite of this economy, we're living better than we've ever lived. We're driving better than we've ever driven. We're dressing better, yet we complain. And usually people complain because they are dissatisfied. And Israel always found something to be dissatisfied about. No matter what God did for them, they found a reason to complain. You remember when they were thirsty and they were out in the wilderness, they started complaining, we're going to die out here of thirst. The Bible says God gave them water from a rock. Then they became hungry and they began to complain, we're going to starve to death. So God sent them some holy groceries called manna that came every morning. When the dew fell, manna was on the ground. God gave it to them freshly every morning. They didn't have to work for it. All they had to do was just go outside, pick it up. But when we come to our text this morning, they are dissatisfied now with the manna. They tell God, God, we don't want this manna anymore. We need you to change the menu. We're tired of eating the same thing day in and day out. We want some meat. We want something solid. We don't want your provision like you've been giving us. We want some meat. And oh, brothers and sisters, listen to what happened in verses 4 through 6. Now, the mixed multitude who were among them yielded to intense craving or lusting. So the children of Israel also wept again and said, who will give us meat to eat? Look at verse 5. We remember the fish which we ate freely in Egypt, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic. Verse 6. But now our whole being is dried up. There's nothing at all except this manna before our eyes. Listen to how ungrateful they were. Does that sound like any of our children? We're tired of you giving us what you want us to have, God. We're tired of what you're providing for us. We want some meat. We want something more than this manna. We're tired of how you've been providing for us. And brothers and sisters, let me tell you something. When you and I complain, what we're really telling God is, God, you don't know how to take care of us. God, you don't know how to meet our needs. Because God, if you knew how to meet our needs, then everything would go like I want it to go. God, if you knew how to meet my needs, then I'd be driving what I think I ought to drive. I'd be living where I think I ought to live. I would be making the kind of money that I think I deserve to be making. But God obviously, since I ain't making the kind of money that I think I ought to be making, since I ain't driving what I think I ought to be driving, since I ain't living where I think I ought to be living, then God obviously, you don't know how to take care of me. Brothers and sisters, when we complain, we have the wrong attitude toward God. Because what we're doing is we're really not only rejecting the provisions of God, but when we are unjustifiably, excessively complainers, we are actually rejecting God himself. Remember Adam and Eve? God made Adam first. And for a while, it was only God and Adam on this earth. And since there was only Adam on the earth, Adam had an opportunity to work on the most important relationship of his life. And that was his personal relationship with God. And it was only after Adam had got his relationship with God right, then God blessed him with Eve. I wish I had somebody. Listen, can I tell you, if God has blessed you with singleness, Christians, this is your time to get your relationship with God right. Because the most important relationship you have is with God. And I'm going to tell y'all about this a little later when I talk about honoring your first marriage. God is your first marriage. And if you don't get that right, then if you mess up your first marriage, then you know good and well when God puts somebody in your life, it's already jacked up. Because if you don't learn first how to love God, you sure ain't going to know how to love nobody else. And if you don't learn how to love yourself, I wish I had somebody. How you going to love somebody else? You don't even know how to love yourself. Listen, and then some of us spend a lifetime trying to accumulate stuff. But at what cost? You lost your family. Children can't stand you. And on your deathbed, you're going to find yourself saying, I wish I'd been a better father. I wish I had been a better mother. I wish I had spent more time with my children. I wish I had somebody here. I come to tell you that when you complain, God just may give you what you've been complaining about that you don't have, and you're going to end up regretting the day that you ever got it. Because you're telling God, God, you don't know how to care for me. And so we complain about everything. We complain about our job. We complain about where we live. We complain about our car. We complain about our house. We complain about our church. We complain about the members in the church. We complain about the officers in the church. I mean, we just find a whole bunch of stuff to complain about. I wish I had somebody. But can I announce to you, you have no right to complain. Listen, the poorest person in America is compared to the richest person in some countries. You don't think you're blessed? Go to Haiti. Go to some of these South American cities. And I'll show you what it looks like to be destitute. I wish I had somebody. We have no right to complain. There's an Indian proverb that says, I complained that I had no shoes till I met a man who had no feet. All I'm trying to tell somebody is, as bad as it may seem in your life, all you got to do is look around. Somebody else is going through a whole lot worse. And so instead of complaining and being dissatisfied, you ought to say, Lord, I thank you that things are as well as they are. Because when we complain, we're displaying a wrong attitude toward God.